Well, as Mladen said in the newsletter, welcome. This is my first sermon as head elder here. It's likely to be my last. I am going to play some secular music in church today, so you do have to be aware of that. And if that makes you feel uncomfortable, probably a good thing, and you probably need to stay. But I'm just warning you, first up. I actually heard the topic of this sermon in La Sierra Church. Sam Leonor, if you've ever heard him, amazing preacher at the Adventist La Sierra Church. And I spoke to him about it afterwards and asked his permission. I said, can I use what you've spoken about in terms of interpretation of the Bible in a sermon? He said, absolutely. And we started talking about it. And it's been something that's been weighing on me since, that was October, when I spoke to him about this. And it's just been going over in my mind. Music is such a huge part of our lives. And I'll tell you a quick story. Last night, we actually had dinner. My daughter yesterday turned 7, so we had some family over to eat. And I was telling them this story. Back in 1991, where most of the people from our Sabbath school class weren't born yet, in that particular year, my brother and I, we were probably 11 or 12 and 14, I think. We went out and bought this song. It was the biggest hit currently of that year. And I'll just play a little bit of it here for you. Let's just see if we can do this. Takes you back, doesn't it? So we bought this song on a cassette tape, and for those kids, I'll explain later after the sermon what that is. But we bought it on this cassette tape, and I remember so distinctly this because my mother, bless her very much, had a small fit about this song. She went off her tree telling us that we couldn't have this satanic style music in our house. She was working in the conference office at the time, and there were obviously a lot of, religious snobs working in the conference office at the time. And she felt some pressure to keep, this level of secular music out of our house. My brother and I couldn't, we were like, it's a beautiful song, isn't it? It was Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. We didn't know that because we weren't allowed to go to the movies, but we had heard about it. And we played it. And as I said in the story last night, the most funny thing about this song later is about 3 months later after we'd bought this song, we're at Pathfinders doing our signing honour. 8 Mile Plains Pathfinders. Mum wouldn't let us come to Springwood, a little too out there. And we were at 8 Mile Plains Pathfinders, and what song did they use for the signing language? Everything I do it for you. Link and I can just remember going back and smiling so much when we told Mum that was the song we were using for our sign language honour. We just thought it was just so poetic. As you would have heard, last year, October, only a few months ago, 500 years of what? What came about? Reformation. Martin Luther there in October putting those 95 thoughts that he had on this door. I mean, these are thoughts that completely changed the church. The church that we know it today as the Catholic Church. This is where Protestant churches started veering off away from the Catholic Church. It's where our own church formed the split. If you keep following our church down through Baptists and all of the different churches, the Lutheran Church, we end up here. What made it so important then was that these ideas, these 95 ideas that he put on that door, were the most dangerous ideas that the church at the time had ever seen, and they were scared. Because for the first time in the church's history, normal people, lay people, everyday people could access the Bible. This hadn't happened before. Luther actually said a simple layman armed with scripture is greater than the mightiest pope without it. For him, it was all about getting the Bible into the hands of every single person that could read. And if they couldn't read, be read to. And you've got to remember that where it's come from is in a period of time where a priest, a pastor, your religious elder would come up the front and say, this is what you believe. No explanation needed, but this is what you have to do. And if you've got to pay money for this to get saved, you couldn't question that. You just did it. Because most of these lay people were fervent Christians. They desperately wanted to have a relationship with God, with Jesus. But they only had one way to access that, and that was the way the church told them they actually had to be. There were 5 solas as they spoke about. And look, you would have heard about this, especially in the last 6 months as we've been talking about the Reformation, the 500-year anniversary. But the one I want to talk about today, Sola Scriptura, is all about the Bible and how important that was in these 95 documents. Throughout the sermon today, as part of my illustration, I'm going to play some different music. So, some people are going to feel a little uncomfortable, like Reg. I do have some music for you, and I did speak to Max this morning, and I've gotten some music from the 50s for him to throw it in there, make him feel a little comfortable. But let's have a look at this. So my next little bit of music that I'm going to play now, just to talk about different styles of music. I'm not saying these are good, bad, they're just different styles, just a few seconds of each of them. Let's go this one.
I want to see you all on your baddest behavior.
I am going to do some interpretive dance later, but that's halfway through, so you've got to hold out for that one. It's a very sort of electronic kind of music. That's a particular style of music. Right or wrong, not saying, but just we'll look at different styles as we go through today. Sola Scriptura, one of those 5 pillars that I spoke about, it is the one of all of them that absolutely fueled Luther to go through here and start pushing for the Reformation. It was the one where as he read the Bible and started to understand it, he'd been trained in theology, remember. As he went through it, the people have to have this in their hands. They absolutely have to. For 1,000 years, the church had said that only clergy could possibly be smart enough to explain the intricacies of the Bible. And Luther and the Reformers came along and said, you know what? The Bible is simple enough for any human to pick it up, whether or not they've heard of Jesus, not heard of Jesus, wherever they're at in their religious or Christian experience, to pick it up and read from it, to get something out of it, to start learning more about God and about Jesus. He said the church can never have authority over the Bible. It will always be beneath it. The church will never be greater than the Bible. The Bible creates the church. John Wesley in the 18th century said, in all cases, the church should be judged by Scripture, not the Scripture by the church. And there's a massive difference. Our churches should be judged by what is in this book, rather than we as a congregation judging what is in this book. What does Sola Scriptura not mean? I guess is where I want to start. And the basis of the sermon today, what does it not mean? What was he not implying when he spoke about how authoritative and how important the Bible was in his religious experience? He absolutely did not mean that the Bible is to be the only book you ever read on your religious experience, your Christianity, your walk with God. It is absolutely the most authoritative and most important, but it does not mean it is the only. It also doesn't mean, Sola Scriptura does not mean that we, although we can read the Bible, will interpret it correctly. How many people here would be willing to put their hands up and say they are absolutely certain that they can interpret the Bible correctly? All aspects. That you know exactly what God thinks. And that when he inspired these writers to put these books together, that you know exactly why he inspired them, what the reasons were behind it. Today in our Sabbath school lesson, we were throwing up verses on the screen, And it's amazing how a small verse can be completely taken out of context if you read just a small section. Somehow our brains have to encompass the Bible in its entirety to try and understand what he was actually meaning. So many people, because of this power that's been put in our laps. How many people here have more than one Bible at home? In their whole house? More than 5? Probably more than 10, and you would still keep with the hands up. I was looking around our house this morning for different Bibles. I was actually trying to find a Bible for my granddad. It's a very, very old Bible that we've had, and it was falling to bits, and I was trying to find it. And I must have found 20 plus Bibles around the house, including some from primary school for me, that has me writing the names of girls in the front page cover. I did, yeah. I'm not sure what I was doing in Bible class, but you watch Bible class, Bruce. You just got to be very careful with the boys in there. Looking through all these Bibles, I thought back to myself and I said, I haven't opened many of these in ages. I mean, most of us now will pull out, if you want to read the Bible, you'll pull out your phone or an iPad or some sort of electronic device. And it's great when you're preaching a sermon, you see so many people on their phones and you know they're reading the Bible. And it's lovely to see as you sort of look across. It's beautiful. That is where we are in life now. The problem is so many people, because we have this power in our hands, on our phones and everything, we go off and start interpreting the Bible as though we absolutely know best. We think that we've got it right. And we go off individually and make all these assumptions. We make all of these interpretations. And that is why the church was put in place. Luther said, the church is here so that people with all your different interpretations can come together, discuss, talk, and try and work out what interpretation makes the most amount of sense in context and run with that. What is different about the Adventist church from Seventh-day Baptists? Not specifically, why are we here together as Adventists and you are not down the road at a Lutheran church or an Anglican? What are the reasons you are here? Not rhetorical. What are some of the reasons that you might be in an Adventist church and not a different church? You really have no idea why you're here. Family, community. And I would suggest that if you are an Adventist because you align yourself with the interpretation of the Bible most closely with how our church does. And if you don't, you should be looking around for a church where your interpretation of the Bible more closely aligns itself. I was born an Adventist, raised an Adventist, had a reasonably strict mother when it came to Adventist ideals. I love her for it. But at some point, you have to make your own decision of why am I an Adventist Christian and not some other denomination? And I still go through all the things I believe in. And for me, whether or not just because it's how I've been brought up or what I truly think that I now believe it, this church more closely aligns the interpretation I have of the Bible more than any other denomination. Here's one that I know Mladen would absolutely love if he was here. Let's do this one for a second. It's a jazzy kind of music. This was Max's wedding song, actually. That's where I got it from. It had just come out then. Again, a different style of music. Very, very different from the first song that we played, the electronic style of music. Why is it different? I mean, there are music teachers in this room here. What makes music different across the board? I mean, there's only so many notes you can have on a piano or on a guitar. There's only so many beats you can have. And yet, how many different songs can you think of that sound very unique? This week, you might have heard in the news that there's been some backlash over a Ed Sheeran song. Ed Sheeran, for those who are older, he's a singer, musician, red hair, quite famous. And he's been accused of plagiarism now from another song. And they're saying, well, you know what? At some point, given the very finite amount of resources a musician has in terms of notes, rhythm, there will have to be overlapping of interpretation of that particular piece of music. There just has to be. When that is, I have no idea. There's definitely not something I'm good at. We often use the Bible as something to justify ourselves as well. How many, and this is rhetorical, don't put your hands up, how many times have you actually decided you wanted to do something, or you wanted to buy something, or you wanted a reason that you thought, you wanted to do something, you needed a reason for it, and you can go back to the Bible and you can start creating your own reasons in there. You know, if all of a sudden you start earning a lot of money, and you can buy nice things, you start saying, well, it's okay. Abraham was a really rich man, and he was very much loved by God. And if all of a sudden you start looking around and coveting other things or other people, you start going, well, hang on, David did that, and I mean, Jesus came from him. And you start making interpretations of the Bible to fit what you want it to actually do, rather than what God was meaning from it. Sam, when I was talking to him, said the crazy thing was that somebody came into his class. So he's a chaplain over at La Sierra University. It's my sort of de facto church over in the US. And as I said, brilliant preacher. And he said some student came into his class that day, or that week, and said to him, Pastor, I've been reading the Bible and I have not found any mention of marijuana or pot. Does this mean it's okay? And Sam said to him, are you high right now? And he said, no. And Sam said to him, your eyes are very bloodshot, you're slurring your speech. Are you sure, you're not high? Yeah. And Sam's like, well, hang on, you just lied and twisted the facts then. That is in the Bible, definitely not pot or marijuana. But he said, isn't it crazy how we start looking for things the Bible doesn't talk about? I mean, the Bible doesn't seem to make it overly clear on many different subjects. It doesn't talk about cigarettes, and yet if I pulled one out from my back pocket right now and started smoking, as I said, this was likely to be my last sermon, there would be some issues within the church, even though nobody from this church could actually show me a verse in the Bible that says, Loren, you are not allowed to smoke. So where do we get it from? I mean, people can come and say, look, I want reasons to sin in essence. David slept with his wife. This guy got drunk. Peter had tantrums. He carried a concealed weapon and knocked off somebody's ear. Don't get me started on Lot's daughters and sleeping with him. Solomon had 900 wives. That is exhausting. Moses killed a guy in anger and went to heaven still. He was translated. The Israelites were so bad, they had to be told not to do anything sexual with animals. Aaron made a golden calf when God was literally in front of him. Aaron, who had seen miracle after miracle, had a cloud above him, had his brother up the mountain in front of him talking with God. They could hear the rumblings. And he still thought making a golden calf was okay. And Adam chose his wife over God. So many, these are just snippets of stories you could pull out from the Bible and say, well, all these guys did this, or the Bible never talks about this, so I can get away with whatever I want. Here is another one. Reg, you may want to turn your hearing aids off for this one. Let's do it. Not particularly my style of music, but it is a style of music that a lot of people listen to. They also tend to wear black. They tend to congregate in their own communities as well, but it is a very passionate style of music that a lot of people are into. The Bible doesn't talk about gun ownership. It doesn't talk about shooting up heroin. It doesn't talk about online porn. It doesn't talk about all these things. It doesn't even talk about whether or not you should support Trump if you lived in America and you had a vote. It doesn't talk about so many things that are in our culture that is current and relevant to us. So what is the use of the Bible? Why did Luther go to all this effort 500 years ago to get the Bible into our hands? If it simply doesn't talk about so many of the things we struggle with now. Only a few months back, we had a massive referendum here. You may have heard about it. The Marriage Equality Act, the referendum that got sent out. If you didn't hear about it, I assume you're about 2 months old. And it split so many churches up the middle going, what does the Bible say about this? How do we reconcile between what some people see and read in the Bible and other people see and read in the Bible? And they come up with two completely different answers on a particular topic. Everything in the Bible is true, but not everything that is true is in the Bible. Everything that is in here, I honestly believe, is absolutely infallible. It is fact. It is written by God, inspired by Him. But just because something is not in here does not make it false. You can still have a lot of truth outside of that. We as a church should know that more than others. We've got Ellen White, who's written so many books that we use. We're not going to throw everything out just because it's not in the Bible. We simply have to compare it to what is written in here. This week on Channel 7, there was a story because as part of the Australian Open starting tennis, I'm a massive tennis fan, but as part of tennis, they have to draw the tournament schedule. Who's going to play against who in all of these, the early rounds, for example. And they always get a previous winner to come along and actually do it. And this year, anyone know who they got to do the tournament draw? Sorry? Maria Sharapova. They're getting slammed in the media now for this, the Australian Open, and how Channel 7 ended up doing the interview and not mentioning certain things. What's the main gripe people have with Maria Sharapova at the moment? She has won the Australian Open, so she's legitimately allowed to do this. What's their gripe with her? She did drugs. Perfect answer. She did drugs. She took a banned substance. She's been out of the game for almost a year and a half as punishment for that. And they think that maybe putting her up and getting to do the tournament draw is sending the wrong message to kids. The kids, if you do drugs, it's okay. We will still love you afterwards. Some of the same arguments are used about the Bible, saying that the Bible glorifies bad things that people did. But does that mean we're actually interpreting it correctly? Another piece of music, let's go some sort of soul kind of, let's have a look. Just nice, quiet music. It's putting Peter to sleep. It's nice. Another form of music. Very different to heavy metal that we might have heard just before that. Again, a different way to interpret sound. Didn't David have such heartache in his life when he didn't follow God? So we're talking about the Bible now, not actually telling us to do bad things. But David, heartache. Was Solomon really happy when he didn't follow God? Did Moses have to suffer consequences after he'd killed that Egyptian or after he disobeyed God? Absolutely. Did Adam and humanity end up suffering because he chose his wife over God? There are always consequences if we don't do the right thing. As I said, the Bible makes it, I wish the Bible made it so much clearer on so many different subjects. Ones that we grapple with day to day. The ones that if you're in a workplace, people will come to you and talk to, because if you're the token Christian in your workplace, you're the one who's going to get asked why you believe this, why you don't believe this, why do you finish on a Friday here, why don't you drink, whatever it might be. They're going to ask you these questions. And they want to know reasons why. And they all know that the reasons have to come out of this. And yet, as I said, you try showing them verses that tell you why you don't eat pork. Because there will be just as many verses that somebody else will throw your way showing, well, hang on, here's what Paul said about it as well. Different people interpret the Bible so differently. When we get onto things like using Scripture for the right reasons, we were talking, those who did the lesson, today. What was the topic of the lesson today? Anyone? Good church. Excellent work. Did no one do the lesson this week at all? That's right, I see I want to take prosperity gospel. Massive in the US. Just because it's massive doesn't also mean it's right. But why do all these people, you've got people like Rob Bell, Billy Graham, these are people you've probably heard of. Martin Luther Jr., Rick Warren, Joel Osteen, Bill Hybels, Brian Houston, Kendall Cobbin. All brilliant preachers in their own right. Lead massive churches around the world. Have the best team around them. And yet none of them agree on the interpretation of the Bible. Not one of those people I mentioned, and there was a distinct lack of women, I'm aware of that, in that particular list before I start getting things thrown at me. They just happened to be the list, other than Kendall, hate to say that, Kendall, but other than Kendall, the most influential preachers of the last 50 years in Time magazine. How can all of these men, these preachers who have dedicated their lives in some way, shape or form to the Bible, not be able to agree on what it actually says? And you think about our church, we have some awesome doctrines in there. We've got some that have been quite controversial. Anyone want to throw any controversial doctrines that we might have as a church? Sanctuary. Many of our pastors out there today were literally taught at Avondale by Des Ford, and who was agreed upon is probably one of the most knowledgeable people in the Bible, of reading the Bible, interpreting the Bible. And yet again, so many people disagree of a particular interpretation of a bunch of verses in the Bible. How is it that all these people who have dedicated their lives to reading, to praying over this Bible, get different answers from it? And as I said, I doubt there'd be two people in here who have the exact same interpretation on every single thing the Bible talks about. You can read the same verses and come out with different answers depending on how you're brought up, what you believe, maybe what you want to believe, what fits your lifestyle more. How does the Bible do this to us? Why does it do it to us? Do one more piece of music. Let's go more sort of sad music. Not sad, acoustic. So many different styles of music out there. The one thing that Sola Scriptura does not say is sola a qualitate discordi. And for all of my friends, we speak Latin to each other all the time. It means uniformity. Luther never said that interpreting the Bible, everybody would come out with the exact same uniform answer on every single subject. And yet we live in a world where even within our denomination, within our church, within our classes, within our group of friends, we can look across the aisle, and if you guys literally all turned around right now and started looking at people around you, just start looking. Start judging all the people around you for a second. I'm looking at some people, it's quite easy to judge them. But it isn't amazing that we can look at people beside you. It could be your spouse, a friend, a relative, somebody who you see up the front, and you can look at them and go, they've so got that wrong. I absolutely have it right, and they have it wrong. God came to me in a dream last night, and he told me exactly what he wanted from this church. It is now my job to force that upon our church. Actually, that's pretty much how my sermon came down, and I'm forcing it upon you. But isn't it amazing that we can do that to people around us when we are all here for hopefully one reason? Why did you come to church today? And not kids, because you were probably forced, but adults, why did you come to church today? What are some of the reasons you may be here for? Some examples, Connection. It is the reason we don't go and worship alone. We want community. Somebody else? There was no one else? Okay, I just confused those two sentences. It didn't make sense to me. One, up the back. To listen to this. That is an excellent reason, can I just say. We come here because sometimes we feel we have to. We sometimes come here knowing that although we don't get to heaven through works, we've got more of a chance if we rock up to church than if we just stay at home. We might come here because we honestly want to learn. We want to have community. We want to get together and start talking about what we believe, why we believe it, and make sure we're on the same track as the other people you trust around you. A rabbi once said that a Bible is like a diamond. If you always look at it from the same angle, it is beautiful. But you never fully get to experience its true beauty until you start turning that diamond in the light. Until you start turning it and seeing all the different reflections, refractions, different colors of light coming through that diamond. And that is why all of us men buy beautiful diamonds for our fiancés and girlfriends at the time. It's for the beauty of the diamond, or not to get into trouble. And when you look at it, for all of those who have been engaged and you did get a ring that had a diamond on it, you're obviously new Adventists. We wouldn't wear jewelry. But if you got your ring, you'd be showing it off instantly. As soon as somebody hears that you are engaged, it's like a flock of seagulls around a chip. And you walk down the front, and you've got all these people going, oh, can I have a look at your ring? The beauty is magnified as you let light go through it, and you twist and turn it and look at it from angles you haven't looked at before. It is still beautiful if you only ever look at it from one angle, but you don't truly embrace it. It's like a spouse. I have one. It is one of the most important relationships that I've had in my life. Some would say the marriage bond should be the most important relationship. I agree. But it doesn't mean your spouse should be your only relationship. You need friends. You need other people. I need golf with my buddies to vent beautifully about my spouse. To talk about, to discuss things that I can't talk to Emma about. I need other people in my life to really be whole. And although Emma claims she can give me everything I need from life, she doesn't. As in, she doesn't claim that, not that she doesn't give me everything I need from life. Flog. I'm just going to walk out now. She can't possibly give me everything I need from my life. And that is why we have families and friends, and we come to community here at church, because you want different people to commune with. You want different people to interpret ideas that you've actually had. One of my favorite songs, well, this will be controversial, I'm sure.
1, 2, 3. My baby don't mess around because she loves me so.
You remember this song? Anyone ever heard this song before? What if I told you it's a beautiful Christian song? It's not. Outcast was the duo who actually performed it. The main guy, Andre 3000, because that's a normal name. Andre 3000 ended up writing this song, and in the music video to it, he played all 8 parts of it, which is quite impressive. I assume he got paid well for that. What is so interesting about this song is this song, if somebody gets asked the first time, then you sort of do a little move, which I'm not going to do here. But as you start moving to the music, it sounds almost like a party kind of song. But what is the song about? It's about breaking up with somebody. And he actually said that he couldn't stand the idea of writing a beautiful ballad breakup kind of song when he was going through that pain. So he made a party song instead. And you may say, well, okay, what's the word? Some of the words from the song. But can't see me walk out the door. Don't try to fight the feeling, because the thought alone is killing me right now. Thank God for mum and dad for sticking together like we don't know how. I know what they say, it's nothing lasts forever. Then what makes love the exception? Are we still in denial when we know we're not happy here? How he interpreted that particular song was so different. And it gives a completely different vibe to the song and the lyrics that he actually wrote for it on breaking up and having this heartbreak in his life, having his love life just torn apart. He never says whether or not it was him or his girlfriend at the time that split, but one of them split and it really, really hurt. But when you first hear that song, it sounds so upbeat and so happy. It's all about interpretation. And then you go into all of these songs that I did before. Just hear me out.
I want to see you all on your baddest behavior.
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so. This I know for sure. But then she
It's simply somebody else interpreting the exact same piece of music. It doesn't matter if you go into any of these. Whatever the style of music is, it is simply somebody.
my baby don't mess around because it
A different interpretation of the same. I'll turn this one down. Just for a second, we'll get to the good bit, hey?
My baby don't mess around because she loves me so, and this I know.
Different interpretations of the exact same song. Just 2 more.
she loves me so, and this I know for sure.
Amazing how somebody can take the same physical piece of music, the same notes on sheets of paper, and come up with so many different versions of the same song. And I reckon some of the covers of Hey Ya actually suit the mood of the lyrics so much better than what dearest Andre 3000 did when he actually put that music video out and the style of music he specifically chose for it. I know, I'm hungry too. We're getting there. Do you have the interpretation of the Bible right? Do I? We all here have interpreted the Bible somehow. We're sitting here. So you've interpreted the fact that you think you should be in church. You have beliefs. You have a system of what you've been taught, what you still believe, what you do. Maybe doctrines like where you go, what you eat, what you put into your body. And do you have it right? The problem that so many churches have is they believe they are the only ones who could possibly interpret the Bible. And Luther, 500 years ago, said, you know what? God gave all of us the ability to interpret it. Don't get me wrong. I think I am part of a church who I agree with its interpretation more than any other denomination. I've looked at many in my lifetime, and that is why I'm here. I want to be part of this community because of its interpretation. I don't want to bend the Bible to suit myself, and I do that all the time, and if you tell me you don't, you're lying. We bend what we read in the Bible to fit our lives so often. So when you look around to your fellow humans here in church, our work, but especially here in this group of people who also put their hand up to say, I love God and I want to learn more about him. When you look across and we start judging the next person beside us, and as I say, that is one of my hobbies on a Sabbath morning when I come to church. It's quite fun. You start judging the people around you. We have to remember that there is an excellent chance that we don't have the interpretation of the Bible right. And we have to keep an open mind to think that maybe God will speak to us and give us new light. Exactly what Ellen White said when she wrote those books. What we say as a church in our 20, how many are we up to now, Mac? 28, 29 fundamentals now? And that's the thing I love about it. We might have grown up with 27 fundamentals and now we've got 28, and I don't mind if it becomes 29 or 30, as long as we as a church are willing to move when we see new light. When we come across an interpretation that we now believe is correct, I want our church not to stay with the 27 and be able to grow and expand. I'm just going to finish with one verse today. Quite odd, hey, a sermon about the Bible and I don't even use it. Matthew 22, 36 to 40. Teacher, what is the most important commandment in the law? And Jesus answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and most important commandment. The second most important commandment is like this, and it is love others as much as you love yourself. Because all of the law of Moses, the books of the prophets, are based on these two commandments. If churches simply stopped comparing each other and started following those commandments, the ones that all the other commandments we follow are based on, it says, maybe we would start to see other people's interpretations of the Bible. Maybe we would question our own and try and work out what we actually believe rather than just what we've been told. Maybe we would end up with a much happier, love-filled kind of church. Please bow your heads. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this awesome book that drives so many of us crazy when you just can't always understand what was meaning. It's as though we want a complete list of do's and don'ts, rights and wrongs written down in black and white that would make our lives so much easier, but instead you gave us one thing that hurts us and makes us so happy, and that is the ability to make a decision ourselves. Bless us as we read the Bible and come up with these interpretations, as we come back to church and we talk about them and work out what we actually believe and want and what we think you mean for our lives, and help us to do it in a love-filled way that will encourage other people to want to learn more about you, to want to read this awesome book. In your name, amen.